Good evening and welcome to the program Spot On. My name is Jacqueline Adibija. Sexual violence has been defined as any sexual act or attempt to obtain a sexual act by violence or coercion. Acts even to traffic persons, that is, to move someone from one place to the other. Acts that are directed against a person's sexuality. Any act, in short, that is perpetrated against an individual's sexuality, whether you're transporting that person from one place or the other because of the person's sex, or there's violence, what we call simply rape, in our environment, is a crime. And its history is so long. Sexual violence has been one of the most used weapons of war for the longest time ever, like in memory. Sexual violence even was used way back before history was being penned down. And you would think that with the way that we are advancing in the world, with all the technology and innovation in the world, that we would start to see a decline because people are beginning to understand that this is wrong. Instead, it's grown worse. And not only has it grown worse, we live in communities where we make it easier for perpetrators to continue to do wrong, for them to continue to have a field day. And that is why today I have, with pleasure, with me in the studio, it's my pleasure to introduce to everyone Yusuf Kanhu. Yusuf Kanhu is an officer with the Legal Awareness of Nigerian Women in Kaduna State, and they have been doing quite a lot of work in that area. And so today we'll be taking a look at rape, or should we say sexual violence. Rape is what a lot of us know, but sexual violence and its attendant effects on society. We'll be taking a look at that this evening. Mr. Yusuf Kanhu, it's great to have you with us in the studio. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, let's first start with the definition of rape, because I find time and again in conversation, in the reading of write-ups and articles of all sorts, you begin to get a feeling like the definition of sexual violence has only been narrowed down to the act itself. Give us a definition, a better definition of what sexual violence entails.
Well, at the moment, there won't be any better definition. Can only give definitions based on context or perspective. Sexual violence is very, very wide, and this has to do with sexual behaviors and the culture of people and how they relate, to spouses or partners. Now, if you look at, there are quite a number of things that is responsible for that. Basically, when people want to talk about sexual violence, so many people narrow it to direct intercourse, unconsented. And they just deem that as, or term that as sexual violence. But there is more, to that. It doesn't have to concern just penetration. There are videos you watch where celebrities are singing and creating cultures or phenomenon that makes women look like nothing less than objects to be desired. And, they pen this in the minds and values of their fans, people who love them. And it's difficult when you see people who are celebrities, so-called celebrities. They have so much fans, and once they do anything, it becomes a style, and you see that their lovers are trying to copy or follow suit, and that would be a style in society. And so abuses of sexual nature is so wide. You could see that there are people who perpetrate sexual jokes. You look at a woman and you pass very, careless comments, and those things should be discouraged. It should be interrupted, as a matter of fact. So sexual violence is very, very wide. A mere look of a woman or otherwise can be a sexual act or violence act. So there are so many things that one can, because if we want to start a specific definition, it might not suit the context of discourse. But as we progress, we could talk about this aspect of it and look at what are the things. But sexual violence, in simple terms, is just those actions and behaviors that has to do with sexuality, and that is unacceptable. Because if you look at our country, there are a lot of things that allows for that to happen. The culture of silence, the culture of misunderstanding of sexual behaviors, because there are instances where women sometimes want to prove very difficult, and men take advantage of that. Simply because she wants to be very difficult, the sexual cultural, the sex myth, takes effect, because she is taking a no for a yes, or she's taking a yes for a no, some sort of behavior that is not so straight with the kind of orientation that we have, especially for emerging girls who are just growing up, trying to understand life, who do not have the capacity to debate or to discuss about their sexual strength, sometimes settle for just anything, and sometimes they are forced to take actions that is inappropriate or they do not want. And sometimes because of certain cultures, in this part of the world, most times the victims are blamed and the perpetrator are not blamed. Let's start talking about those people perpetrating. Let's talk about them. Let's look at these issues. This is an issue that is actually eating deep. Look at some advertisement. Women have become symbol of advertisement just because she has a figure 8 and she is placed on TV in place of advertisement to look at a product like her. And those descriptions are given. Sometimes I really don't understand the orientation that some women even love it. They come out in that style and they feel it's actually a style. It's a way of life. But it's a certain culture, that abuse people. If you come on screen and you allow people see that as a way of life, you normalize that. And others would not see it as anything. Moreover, she is on screen and she does this and she works this. I look at videos. For instance, the guy who is the producer, the either songwriter or the person with the song is dressing properly. And you see women dress in very funny ways. They are the ones dancing and putting all the strength, and the adrenaline is pumping, and they are trying to prove that they can actually sing to look attractive. Some people have taken attraction, some kind of behavior to mean attraction. And so there's quite a lot to talk within this space. And I think
there is indeed, Yusuf Kanhu. As a matter of fact, there's a lot that you have raised from what you've said, but I would like to start from some of, from the beginning, pick some of those things that you said. I hear you talking about, women, girls, young ones, emerging ladies, and all of that. Does this mean that sexual violence cannot happen or does not happen to men or boys?
Well, it does happen to all. There is also same-sex violence, men to men. There is also defilement, where you talk to or you engage in sexual intercourse with somebody who is not legally, cannot legally consent. This can be, discussed in different points. For instance, someone could be drunk She is up to age, but she is drunk. At that point, she does not have the capacity to legally give consent because she is intoxicated. Something is controlling her. For instance, there could be the situation of somebody who is mentally ill. And then there are those who are minor. They are not of age. So they cannot be able to dialogue the issue of their sexual acts. And so they are easily influenced. And you know, their sexual actions is determined by someone simply because. And then there are those who are also very impoverished by circumstances. They earn very less. They are almost at so there's quite a lot of things. And you see, this shaped the perception of men. I talked about, you know, the reactions of women towards men. Some of these reactions also shape the perception of men towards women. Because sometimes when you do not give the right signal, the man sees that, I think that she is in for it. So let's game it. And so this also allows for certain jokes and for people who cannot decide that kind of situation. And so the man feels, well, I think that she's given me a green light. Why not? Let me just fall for it. After all, she is the one giving it. So I think that we need to understand that there's a line that we need to bring out this discipline in us to be able to understand when you are joking with somebody who really understands what you are saying, not necessarily that you are trying to take advantage. Look at offices. I've seen very great directors in the world who are producers of movies and very great in the world stage, abusing women for characters, for giving them roles and all of that. So this is actually a very serious crisis that we are faced with. And fashion and beauty would not end. It is a profession, and we must understand that there are stages where you could tag this as fashion, and there are stages where you need to be very careful about, you know, how you react and what you tell the children, what you watch with the children and all of that.
You know, let's continue with some of the concepts or conceptions around sexual violence. Many people believe that the way you dress actually could influence whether or not you get, you know, raped or some sort of sexual violence is carried out on you. But in the same vein, there are people who have also pointed, you know, to the fact that there are kids in diapers who get raped. So how does their dressing influence that? However, what would your own thoughts be, having worked with people? What would your thoughts be about this? The way you dress, does it influence, you know, this thing that we commonly call rape?
First of all, you need to understand that pastors rape, imams rape, professors rape, and just like the instance that you talked about, you see very little kids being raped. What do you say about that? I don't think that completely dressing is completely a reason why men should take rape, you know, justify rape. I don't think so, because there are people who are wearing very big clothes. If you check India, for instance, most of them don't dress like we dress. They have a different cultural, way of life and how do. I was discussing with a friend who is from Sri Lanka. She said it's very difficult to be a woman in Sri Lanka. Most of them, you know, pedal buses, and you see them crowded. And as a woman, if you're amongst men, they are touching you indecently. And this is my friend that I've met. We've worked together, you know, we've traveled together, and I've watched her all the while. She does not dress like the way we tag women dress in the fashion that they do today. And so that kind of indecent dressing is not a reason for it's not a justification for it. However, that can also lead certain people to raise their hormones and start to think. Because right now I'm talking about perception. Sometimes, there's something that happens on the inside and it builds slowly. And sometimes it's determined by the signal that you give. So if you sometimes dress decently and that's the way you be addressed and you are seen that way. There are people who dress very decently, but they are really bad people. But sometimes when people recognize or get to know that they are really bad people, like, she dresses well. I was afraid to actually talk to her. But it's so easy today because the people who are in the profession of that kind of dressing are very cheap people. And for instance, prostitutes, when you get to see them, they have a fashion of dressing. So once you see a woman dresses in that way, the perception is that this could be giving me an invitation to treat. And so I need to jump into it. And even without talking, I need to initiate or, introduce that conversation that will lead to that. So in a way, if you look at it, it's not a fair ground for people to dress unjustifiable because they think that men are disciplined. Sometimes men are moved by what they see. Sometimes, and not all men, by what they see. And so when you see beauty, you want to talk about it depending on her standards. There are people who are drawn by that. There are people who are pleased by that. But you know that if you leave suya open and the guy who likes to eat suya a lot sees it, he would want to taste it. But if you cover it and you present it in a manner, dignity, that's why what you buy in the boutique is different from what you buy by the roadside. It might be the same. I mean, the price because of the standard or the class. So now it depends on how you dress. Sometimes it's appropriate. Not sometimes. It's actually good to dress.
As a matter of fact, just let me jump in. I'm so glad you're towing this line because for the longest time we've had this what do I call it now? Like a clash of concepts. On the one hand, we say dress the way you want to be addressed.
Yes.
And then on the other hand, we have people saying that, dressing has nothing to do with, putting yourself in harm's way. I don't, like you said, it's not justification for people who would do anything. However, does your dressing help in sending the right signals wherever you go? So many people, it's just is like there's no line. It's just there. On the one hand, we're saying dress the way you want to be addressed,
yes.
And on the other hand, we say your dressing has nothing to do with the way you are treated. Like you said, no justification for sexual violence on anybody. However, your dressing could have an effect on the way you are treated. All right. So let's move on to another aspect of all of this, which is the culture of our society and why rape has gotten worse. And even though there are those who would argue and say rape has actually not gotten worse, we've just gotten better at reporting it. What would you say about that quickly before we go to how our culture influences this
think
rape?
that rape issues is underreported. If you look at statistics, and then a lot of people cannot even define what rape is, sexual violence. Right? So a lot of people are still ashamed. Even in the U.S., I was taking reading a statistics from a World Population Review, and it's talking about 40% of people who perpetrate rape in America, for instance, you have like 10% reported, you have like 4% punished for that, and you have more than 30% working free.
The perpetrators now.
Yes. So there are a lot of things. Sometimes you see, when you report it, you don't get justice for it. The guy is arrested. He doesn't sleep there for a day. The next day, you see him out. Sometimes you are not even taken seriously in some cases. And so people are really afraid. And then the culture of stigmatization. Society will view you as something else. That was why in the first instance I talked about blaming the victim and not the perpetrator. We need to do it the other way around. And so these are some cases that, to an extent, is foiling the culture of perpetrating these acts. And so people don't feel comfortable, even if I come out there and I talk. See, sometimes you even go to the police station. Amongst this law enforcement agents, you see them laughing. It's a case. Sometimes, again, when she goes to report, in the way she dresses, some don't believe is actually a true report. Some people will feel, and like I explained earlier, I talked about this myth. Sometimes when you want a woman or you want to have sexual intercourse with a woman and she is telling you no for a yes, sometimes there is no distinction to really define. And so the misunderstanding is quite...
but how do you know? When you say she's telling you a no for a yes, how do you know that she doesn't really mean no?
This is something I cannot explain. But I think that the level of force should be, if the level of rejection is proportionate to what you are putting in, then you should understand and say no. Because she should insist at some point. But you know that the culture of blame sometimes would allow her to submit. Because, look, take for instance, there are places where girls sneak at night to see their boys. So when you sneak and you are in the hands of a guy who knows that you've sneaked, you could do anything. She is not leaving home to go and see you. Sometimes it's within the neighborhood. And if you look at the statistics of the people the rapists or the perpetrators, mostly are people who are close to you. Or close to the victim, rather. Let me not say you, sorry.
So this thing you just said, would you say it's part of the reason why that this culture of silence continues to protect perpetrators? The fact that I don't know what the statistics really are, but probably 7-8 times out of 10, the perpetrator of sexual violence is actually someone known to the victim.
Yes.
Do you think this is one of the reasons why we continue to encourage this culture of silence?
On one part it is because most times people, once it blows, people want to talk about relationship, how long we've been together, the relationship we've enjoyed, and not looking at certain realities in society. That there are laws that are put in place, to check people, to be able to correct certain ills in society. And if at all anybody comes under the guise of having a relationship or long-lasting relationship, and he didn't see that when perpetrating it, why not? Why is the law in place? People are afraid. And then another instance is the long process in court. Some people just go there and get hired. For instance, today I was in Gimi, it's a ward in Makarfi local government. We are talking about rape. And somebody asked me a question. When we told him about, the SAC Center and some of the civil society organizations that are helping, in checking all these things. And the question that came to me was that sometimes they don't even have money to go to Zaria, to a SAC Center for...
That is the sexual
some
assault.
analysis, yes.
The sexual assault center.
Yes. And sometimes you are asked to go to court. Assuming the court is in Kaduna, for instance, and he stays in Makarfi, or even in Zaria, how would he be transporting himself? So you see, another thing is poverty has also eaten deep into the conscience of our people, and they accept just anything. So the issues are quite enormous. If you look at it, depending on so on one hand is relationship, on the other hand is I don't have this, on another hand is that I'm so tired, I cannot keep up with this, and the lady would keep being traumatized, and by the side people are laughing at her and are looking at her, and some of the girls are even scared. And there are some of the instances where men, especially men, don't take it lightly. Once they say this happens to her, is either the father will kill her, and that fear is in her, and so she's afraid to even communicate this. She cannot imagine saying certain things. It's possible at some quarters of the relationship she had consented, but at some point she wanted to withdraw. That part she doesn't want them to know, and so she's afraid. And the guy is aware that she's afraid, and so he would have the boldness, to continue to perpetrate that act. And then there are also instances where the issue of relationship also.
Yes, you have.
Yes.
Just quickly before we go on our break, I would like to talk about some of the things that people do and they don't see as rape, or maybe it's not really rape. I'd like for you to clarify.
Sexual violence.
Or sexual violence.
Yes.
Now, if a man were to force, because I had spoken to someone before, deeply traumatized by something that happened a long time ago to her, and she said she remembers when people from her family, I'm not going to go into details, forced her, but male people, like men from her family, forced her to masturbate them with her hands. Would you consider this sexual violence? She was quite young, but even away from, let's even say an adult being forced to masturbate someone, would you call it sexual violence?
The first thing you need to look at first is she's a minor. The second point is that you use the word force. So automatically there is no denial to that fact that she was asked to do. And even if they didn't force her, if she is minor, then she do not have the legal right to consent, to give consent to that. If she was more than 18, then, and in Islamic law, in the verb law says, even if you are a Muslim, if you are 14, you can send her to marriage, for instance. But if it is without her consent, you cannot. That's what the law says. And so you need to understand that if she is a minor, that's automatically that's a problem. And then if you put the word force, then it wasn't consented, so it's inappropriate.
So there are a lot of things happening, on that level where we have people being forced to masturbate, being forced to give oral sex,
Yes.
being forced, when we talk about force, it could be also inducement.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
okay, I will give you this amount if you will do this.
Yes.
It's still force, isn't it?
Depending on the situation. If he's a prostitute, that's her job. That's the oldest job that has existed. One of. So if she is, then that's her job. But again, there are also domestic sex workers. They are within the area. They specialize on that. They could go and give you. I'm not justifying that as a Christian, but I'm saying within the ambience of.
But even for sex or commercial
basis,
on commercial basis,
yes.
Even for sex that has been transacted, if you get to a point where she says no,
it's no.
Does the law not say that is no?
No is no. Yes is yes. You can't change that. But it's just that some of the cultures that are associated with our lifestyle is what is actually encouraging that. Because at some point, if she says no, the next question would be, why did you start? And so we should talk about it at the point when she cannot go on. It's like giving somebody food to eat and he gets to the brim. And he says, Yusuf, I cannot eat further.
If you paid for sex,
yes,
and we get into the room,
yes,
and you say no, that it's still a transaction that can be retrieved.
Yes.
You can say, okay, then let me have my money.
Yes.
And walk away. Why would you want to force your attention on someone who changed their mind, and that this is I'm even talking in the context of someone who is a worker. That's how she gets her money.
Now let me say this. Sometimes men love the culture of dominance.
That's part of the culture that is perpetrating this.
Sometimes a culture of dominance. I want to take this anyhow. And once he starts this transaction and action, and it gets to a point where, why don't I just take it? After all, she's a commercial sex worker. or
Or after all, she's a woman.
Yes, after all, she's a woman. She succumbed to it, so she has to. And so sometimes he just takes it because he feels he has the strength to take it. But if you want to do it within the ambience of the law, it's inappropriate. At the point when she can no longer continue, you have to stop it. And that is what makes you a human being.
And this is where we get to some of the situations that people, especially in our community, don't like to hear about. The matter of sexual violence or rape happening between married people.
Yeah.
It's a very, very touchy subject. People don't
delicate.
like, especially men, they don't like being told or hearing that rape can actually take place within a marriage. There's also the issue about men who are raped by women. And, you know, a lot of women just snigger and say men cannot be raped. Is this true?
Well, I've not had situation of where a man has been raped.
By a woman?
By a woman. But I know that sometimes you can just not be in the mood and she is insistent. And sometimes for some reasons, even without her telling you she would cheat on you, you are scared she does not go out because one of man's pride is for his woman to remain with him. And so sometimes you are forced by that to just take that. Let me tell you sincerely, sometimes there are times men are not in the mood. But the ego in the man would not want to accept that he's not. He would always want to be in charge.
But that isn't the same. Would you call that rape? That's his ego at work. That's his ego. I'm talking about situations we've heard where men would say, look, they were tied down and raped by women. And these are just the few that come out. You know, I keep hearing you talking about women, and a lot of people have accused even the media of just highlighting sexual violence against women. We don't talk as much about sexual violence against men. And in this vein, many people in our society do not believe that men can be raped. And I'm talking about being tied down or whatever, the scenario of a woman being tied down and a man also being tied down like that and raped.
First, let me explain to you something about the ego you are challenging. It's also the culture of silence because he feels on top. He feels it shouldn't be said in society that the woman raped me. And so he's quiet. It's a culture of silence. The ego has changed its perception to look at it as I should be superior. I should feel very important. Society shouldn't hear that for me as a man, that, my wife took on me when I was not ready for it. They should not hear that. It's actually a problem itself. Sometimes
so we're talking gender stereotypes.
Yes, we don't admit to the realities. For me, I've not had situation where a man tied down and forcefully, but I think it's possible. I think there are instances because I've seen instances where the man beats the husband. So if she beats the husband, it's possible she could rape him. And, and even before the issue of beating came out, he said he had suffered for a very long time. And he would not discuss this in public. It's still part of the culture of silence that we're talking about. These things happen. And when I started in my introduction, I talked about these cases being underreported. Some of us cannot imagine these things being discussed. I will tell you, some of the people who are championing the case of rape or sexual violence are victims, but they never would open up. They don't own up to it. They wouldn't say it. They would say it when you are together, but they would not come here and say, I was victim of it. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing. Something to talk about.
I would think so, because it isn't only something that happens on your physical self, it's also on your mental self. And that is where even scars for places like that, very difficult to heal. Let's go on a quick commercial break. With us in the studio, Yusuf Kanhu of the Legal Awareness for Nigerian Women. And we've been talking about the attendant effects of sexual violence on our society. When we come back, we will be taking a look at the government and the policies that are in place and how well they have been implemented. Do stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us through that commercial break. Still talking about the attendant effects of sexual violence on our society. So now we're going to quickly bring it back to Kaduna. We don't really have much time because there are a lot of people who might want to speak with you. Let's talk about what the issues are, what the policies say as regards sexual violence in Kaduna State. I'm just going to quickly also inject, because like I said, I'm looking at the time and I want to open up the phone line so that people can talk to you. This issue, the executive order by the governor on castration, have we had anyone castrated? Because as is right now, we have heard of rape issues after that executive order came out. What are the bottlenecks? Where are we going with this? What's next?
The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act is actually, an improvement in a way to discourage sexual violence, and be able to punish perpetrators of same. To my knowledge, at the moment, I've not had one person that has undergone punishment of sorts, like castration or even death penalty. Now, you need to understand that there is a process you have to go through. First, community must play their role. Secondly, the government, the judiciary, will also need to play her role. Then thirdly, the government itself will need to play her own role. First, the community must do the things that they are taught. Once somebody is caught in that act, you don't wash her firstly. You take her to a center, government-approved center, where she can be tested. The semen will be tested side by side, what is in her and that of the man's, and that would give evidence. And secondly, when that is established, you need to go to the law, to the court. The court must also play her own role. There is adjournment of cases, trying to...
You mean we still have adjournment of cases of rape?
Yes, there are instances where you go to court. For one reason or the other, you need to adjourn to prepare, because you're talking about life here. And at the end of the day, if that is proven, you have to take it to the governor for the governor to sign. And so he would not just sign anything. The court must do her job. And so before the court would do her job, the community or the people who are filing the case must provide sufficient evidence, proven beyond every reasonable doubt, to say that this person has perpetrated.
So this is where the problem lies. So how do you prove rape, especially of minors? Now this is a court issue, and most times you have to get scenarios, because the things don't happen when you talk about rape. There are scenarios. It's not a one-way thing that you say, you rape, and no. When you do that, you have fluid in your system. Once it is tested, and then certain, cross-examinations is done, and then at the end of the day, you also need to accept based on that. And even if you don't accept, if the evidence are sufficient, are enough, then he can put it to you that this thing has happened, and then the judge will draw conclusion. And it doesn't just end there. You have to take it to the executive for him to sign. So we're saying
before
that
somebody
since our governor in Kaduna State,
yes,
came out with this
act,
this sword, the act, of course, but with the sword dangling over perpetrators of castration, whether you be male or female, or the death penalty.
Yes,
we've not had the court sign. Bring out judgment on any one of the rape issues we've had in court.
I think the governor has graciously played his part for allowing that to happen. All the debates that took place, and he assented to it. Now it's left for the judiciary to also play her part. The governor is not the judiciary. The judiciary have their own standards, and they need to prove it. There are instances of issues that are in court. Now, the cycle of the judiciary is what we are waiting for. And the governor has vowed that if he receives any of such information, he's going to sign it. I'm saying this on radio. And up to now, because some of the challenges also is that once you take these issues to court, while in court, the complainant will come and say that he's not interested any longer for several reasons. Some reasons you don't even know. Because some of the perpetrators of the act are richer than the victims. And so they go around.
And of course, these adjournments actually take the life out of these. We just talked about a man who told you just yesterday or earlier today that the distance between where he is and going to the trauma center, the sexual assault center, is there's a distance.
Yes.
And there's money to be considered.
Yes.
And so think about a man who already, sells his crops or whatever he needs to do to get her to that center, get these test kits used on his daughter or whomever says that they've been raped, and then the case proceeds to court. And then he has to be shuttling between Gimi, you said?
Yes.
And Zaria, for instance, or Kaduna Metropolis.
Look, the question is, don't they eat? Don't they work hard? Don't they sacrifice? If you have your wife beaten by somebody, won't you go as far as Kaduna from Makarfi to seek justice for her? So if your daughter is raped, is that a reason because you lack? There are organizations that give help.
How many of those people know about these organizations?
We have seen, and this is part of the campaign that we do. When we go around, we give them telephone numbers. You could call, report these cases. We could ask the case be transferred, to a place we can get in touch with you. In a way, not directly, but we expect that you take responsibility of your movement. I would not say that on radio, but there are certain persons who also give help to these people personally. But this is not official. You cannot come on radio and begin to broadcast that because it is not an official thing. It's a personal thing. But we are saying that if you are living in this life, you must eat food, you must work hard. Some of them are traveling for some reasons.
Some people who barely eat.
Yes.
Would you be wrong to see how non-governmental organizations like yours can take centers, not the assault centers now, but centers where things like first aid can be administered? When I say first aid, the complaints, can we start to look at using the palace of traditional rulers as places where rape kits can be put, empower people to be able to take the samples so that you can quickly call to the main center to come and carry it? Is it something that we can even start to look at? I know that there are going to be bottlenecks, but there are things that we can actually, I feel, get through. I stand to be corrected, but I said I wanted people to speak with you, and once again the time is gone. Let's quickly hear from the people, and the lines are open. The numbers are 081 40,989 and 07087 989. Hello, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, you're welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is Alex Oshobu.
You're welcome. Go ahead quickly, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I quickly want to speak on the low statistics the guest spoke on. One of the reasons for this is as a result of the poor implementation of laws. Yes, it's good we have made laws, castration here and there, but at the end of the day, you describe that.
Hello?
So there is no implementation. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
There is no implementation of this law. So as a result of that, you see that the same act is being perpetrated continuously in the society because they know that they will go scot-free.
Right.
And another reason for this is that people in power, they are also involved. Powerful people, rich people in the society, they are involved in this act of rape. So that's why you see that they can easily bribe the law enforcement agents, and even the attitude of the law enforcement agents. You can imagine a situation whereby a victim goes to them to report it. They will be asking the victim for physical evidence. Let me see the physical evidence to know that you have been raped. Some of these attitudes is actually contributing. And the speaker said he has not heard of men being raped. It's happening.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. He says men are being raped. It's happening. Still taking your calls quickly this evening at 081 and 07087 800 989. Hello, good evening. We're connected.
Good evening, ma.
Yes, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
You're welcome. Good evening.
Your guest has spoken. This is Gabriel.
You're welcome. Go ahead, please.
Your guest has spoken very well. You know, everything in this life, we have the way of doing the things. There is legal way of doing the things. Everything in Nigeria now, they follow by law and fact. If there is no evidence, proof of a particular thing, that thing will never have anywhere to go. Like, take for instance, my own example that I'm giving. I was accused a time that I stay with a criminal, which they took me to court, and there's no evidence for that. So if somebody has been accused of rape, they have to prove the evidence has to be proved. Because if there's no evidence proof and you go ahead and you put the person in a place that is not supposed to be, there's no justice, there's no righteousness there or good judgment there.
Okay.
So everything has to be done according to the law. Because if things are doing illegally, it means the government do not know what they do.
Okay.
See, I do tell people that the government, they know what they are doing.
Okay.
Government know what they are doing. When Buhari came out, he said change. This change that you are talking about means we thought it said turn away from evil. Turn away from evil is dancing to the tunes of God and all the prophets, and people do not understand. People are coming against what this man is saying. And it's not even only the one. There is Christian here,
Right.
there is Muslim here.
Okay.
So
We
have to be proof of everything that.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I had to fade you out. We've run out of time. Yusuf, you hear the people. And this man who escaped being labeled with something that wasn't really a crime he didn't really commit, according to him. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more calls, but it is something that bears, continuing a conversation on come next week. However, this issue about implementation, the matter of the wheels of justice rolling too slowly on matters like this. Your last line.
Well, I think that we need to improve, and I think that we are not where we used to be. And definitely, when we keep pressing.
When you say we're not where we used to be, are you saying we've improved?
Yes, we've improved.
Okay.
We have. People are speaking slowly, but not, at the level that I expect. But I think that we need to do more. Communities will need to be very proactive and, be able to avail themselves and be willing to go all through. And within the implementation, we need to also, do. Although there are technical issues, lawyers will tell you, judges will say that there is for them to argue that, but we are saying they should try to expedite some of those actions so that we can get justice.
Well, we will be looking at having a lawyer come next week to, talk more about the role. Probably if we can have you, since you're out there in the field and you've heard the stories, would like to have you and a lawyer come and explain where we're at and why we're having these bottlenecks, especially from the judiciary, like you said, because as long as the paper gets to the governor, it will be signed. However, he hasn't gotten any, because I haven't heard of any castration or, punishment being meted out because of this. However, my own last line is safeguarding is very, very important. In a society that is still developing like ours, we need to safeguard our children, safeguard your daughters, safeguard your wives, safeguard your sons. Let's practice this attitude of security. Yusuf Kanhu would like to thank you very much for joining us on Spot On this evening. It was a pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we'll have you here next week if your schedule does not clash with our programming. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Until next week, remain victorious.